Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Chicanery. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving weekend. It is your
Did you
host, Danny.
celebrate it?
Yes, of course. And it is your host, Dani and JT.
Hello.
So we have the finale of Formula One. It was the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix this past weekend. And we've got a race to talk about as well as a season to recap. So, of course, we will before we get into sort of the nitty-gritty of the weekend, let's start with the broad blanket question. Good race or not?
Honestly, I watched I think a little bit of the race. I was once again busy this time, like traveling and stuff. But I don't know. To be honest, I don't really care for Abu Dhabi as like a circuit in general. So to me, I'm just gonna say like it is what it is. Like in my opinion, I'm gonna say it was a typical F1 race. Like nothing special about it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree. Honestly, the race itself I didn't think was particularly interesting. It got a bit tactical at the end, and we'll talk about that. But broadly speaking, I didn't really think the race was all that great. But before we get to that, I guess we will go through sort of the practice and qualifying sessions to sort of get started. So first of all, and this is perhaps not super unexpected. We've talked about all season about the Red Bulls don't really activate the front tires particularly well, get temperature in them. And the track temps were also a bit cooler this Abu Dhabi weekend than we've had in years past. So the Red Bulls were kind of slow in the free practice sessions. They managed to get the wick turned on for quali, but for a second there, particularly Q3, where Leclerc was all of a tenth, like a tenth and a half, a little less than a tenth and a half back in quali. It was looking like they wouldn't nab pull, but they did. Um, I say local boy, Logan, he actually didn't set a time in qualifying at all because he both of his laps got deleted due to track limits infringements. Uh, as per usual, it feels like we've been talking about this all year. The
Because
way,
we have, it's like it's a never-ending thing. It's always every other circuit F1 goes to. It's gonna be like, oh, are we gonna have issues with track limits this weekend? I don't know. Up to debate. I mean, really practice. It depends. Like the practice sessions that they have really is what determines is this gonna be one of those weekends again? Or are we gonna have a normal F1 race weekend? Even though, to be honest, I don't even think there's such thing as a normal F1 race weekend, but anyways,
yeah, and this case, yeah, it was absolutely not. Track limits was once again kind of a thing this weekend. Like I said, Logan was scored as no time after the end of Q1, and because of course, being a dirty American, practice sessions and quality sessions for Abu Dhabi are kind of a pain to watch, and I was very confused to see Logan roll off dead last, basically with no time. Um, but it's funny, we talk about the Red Bulls being a little slow in practice and looking potentially fallible in qualifying, much like they were at Las Vegas last episode. Much like then, Carlos had a gigantic accident, and I think that was FP2. Now, granted, this was not due to any failings of the circuit, but rather a lapse in talent. But
skill issue.
yeah, basically, yep. And he had a massive incident in free practice and didn't get out of Q1. I don't know how many chassis at this point in the season Ferrari had left, but given his complete lack of pace, basically for the entirety of the weekend, I wonder if this was like the backup of the backup car that they were using because it was just so slow. Um, Lewis was slow, uh, basically all weekend. Um, Struggled mightily in quali, and didn't really do super well in the race either. But interestingly enough, even Lewis himself, I think, said over his radio message after the practice sessions that he noted the two cars had the same setup, but just he couldn't get it to switch on. We've talked about how much of a dog the W14 is. And well, this weekend, at least for Lewis, was no exception. It feels like it's was one or the other. Either Lewis can get the car to work and George can't, or George is quick and Lewis isn't. This car just W14 just sucks.
Honestly, I feel like Mercedes, I don't even know if I can say they've been like going downhill because like honestly, I don't think they were ever really that great this year. I mean, of course they had their moments of like greatness occasionally and then they got podiums and stuff. Never really they're not getting wins, but I mean, I don't know. I can't even say that they fell off because like I feel like that's not even the right word to use. Like they just weren't even there. I mean, it was particularly bad at like I don't know what circuit that was. I think it was Brazil where everything just went downhill for them. The race was just horrible for them. But I don't know. They're a very puzzling team to me.
Yeah. Well, so they sure you probably remember in 2022 with the W13, they looked like, initially that car was not very quick, but they had found some time and some pace as the season went on. And so they thought they had cured the woes of this platform, basically. And then, according to, the technical directors and what have you, they thought they had made some real ground in the off season with getting this car quick. But and I don't believe that the car isn't quicker, but everybody else just made much bigger leaps either in the off season, heading into 2023, or just throughout the season. I mean, we watched, McLaren has basically since Silverstone has really kicked on and has basically been quick all year after that, with the exception of Vegas and here, basically. Well, that's because even by Zach Brown's own estimation, the car is a bit draggy. Mm, Pardon me. But but yeah, no, like I said, W14 has been a dog. Bring on the James Allison is back designing the car, so I'm hoping that the W15 will be a big step on. Um, and I honestly think that could be potentially the most important car of his career. Basically getting Mercedes truly back to the front because they get podiums, but it always feels like it's through circumstance rather than actual pace. But we'll get to that.
I mean, there's that, and then they also probably need to work on like their pit stops because whatever has been going on there, like their pit stops have kind of been awful this whole season. I mean, it's just and it's like it's errors that really shouldn't even be happening, but they do, and it ends up costing them like a podium or like positions that are like pretty valuable in the race. And it's just like, ugh, why would you do this? What like I don't get it. I also love how Mercedes is like very uncreative with naming their cars. Like this year the W14 and the next year the W15, which W meaning wagon, which is car in German, and just the next number up. I love that. I love the dedication to just completely just being uncreative and no imagination at all.
Yeah, yeah, combination of that and of course, that is what Mercedes named their Grand Prix cars, a million and 1 years ago. So it's a combination of yes, heritage, heritage, and yes, general yes lack of creativity otherwise, but yeah, but we'll see what happens with that. But also, front. The McLarens, we were just talking about, the form that they've had, basically for 2/3 of the year, and that would continue. Lando was chugging on his final quali lap, but he got this gigantic slide coming out of turn 14. I'm actually kind of impressed that he managed to gather that up. Um, because if you look, it was huge. It looks like he was running a little wide and tried to add a little bit of throttle to correct it, and then just had this huge slide on the curb. And the curbs at Yas Marina are horrendous. Um, and yeah, and that would result in him being P5 because it really ruins the run basically on that final couple corners onto the straight. But P5 and Oscar qualified P3. It was good stuff, genuinely. Lando's lap, even if it was a little slow, is probably one of the more entertaining quali laps I've seen in a little while. But
I mean, I think Lando has potential. I mean, he's gone a really long time without getting a win. I mean, people, uh, even earlier today, some people in our group chat for sports car racing were joking about how technically Nikita Mazepin has gotten a win before Lando has. As unfortunate as that is, I mean, obviously there's probably some questionable stuff there with Nikita Mazepin more than likely probably being carried by his other co-drivers that he was with. But I mean, I don't know. I think eventually Lando should get a win pretty soon. I mean, at least McLaren was starting to look pretty good towards the end of the season.
mm-hmm.
They had the potential to be competitive and fighting for wins eventually, I think. Like next season they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. And it's funny, to sort of a similar ilk. That means Antonio Giovinazzi has won a championship in a Ferrari before Leclerc has, which is very
He
amusing.
pulled them off. I mean,
Yeah, but yeah, the issue, well, there are a couple of things. Lando does have a bit of a habit of being a little inconsistent on qualifying runs. He's either kind of well, since it's quali, it's not really win it or bin it, but I guess a qualifying equivalent of such. Um, and that means that there are a few, I think, definitely this season, there are a few times when he probably should have had pole, but he goofed it and, well, didn't. But also, Lando is an extraordinarily talented Grand Prix driver, but it really sucks when you're sharing the grid at the same time as Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Like, that sucks. You're talking about, well, now 10 world championships between just the pair of them. And up that tally a little bit if you count, Fernando Alonso, that you add another 2 titles there. Um, so it's just like, just the depth of talent on the grid right now is significant. And unfortunately, I mean, that means somebody loses out. I mean, we saw that during the Schumacher era of domination. Genuinely great drivers that didn't win a ton of races because, well, Schumacher and Ferrari existed. So we'll see. But hoping for, McLaren to do big things next year. Clearly they figured out this set of aero regs in the car, and they've got 2 great drivers. We will see what happens. But moving on to the race, again, not a particularly interesting one, I don't think. But of course, Max started on pole, and he converted that to a win. Big surprise. It's what this was his like 19th pole, and was it like his 16th win of the season or something silly. Yeah, point is he won most of the races. Um,
I've lost track at this point.
Yeah, same. And honestly, I think the tally at this point is purely academic anyway. It's an amusing stat, but doesn't, in the broader context of the season, doesn't really mean anything given that he locked up the championship months ago and basically single-handedly won the constructors too. So it's just like, okay, whatever. But interestingly enough, basically before DRS was turned on, um, Charles put him under huge pressure for those first few laps. It was looking like Charles might actually fight him for the win. Granted, it didn't quite end up as such, but but the fighting did basically it burned up his left front tire because he
I
grumbled.
really, maybe I should refrain from making this like comparison because I've seen it before and it might be beating a dead horse, but I just think that is so funny that he burned up his tires because it just like it sounds like another driver that I know that has a tendency to do the very same thing. Not naming names, but it's just the parallels are kind of killing me here.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, because interestingly enough, yeah, I think it was like lap 12 he complained about the left front tire, and I quote, being a bit hurt. And I mean, he could have genuinely done so. Because, as I've already talked about, the Red Bull is not particularly kind to its front tires, particularly early in a stint. It's easy to either not get them in the operating window or just completely cook them trying to push. But that is
I mean, it's
curious. But
unfortunate Charles doesn't have the same effect that Lewis has whenever he's complaining about his tires, talking about, oh, Bono, my tires are gone. That means he's about to win the fucking race. It's too bad the same effect doesn't happen with Charles. I mean, same thing with, like, you could even say Kyle Busch, too. Everybody knows that if Kyle Busch was complaining about how bad his car was, that meant that he was going to go on and win the freaking race. It's unfortunate that the same thing does not happen to him.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Max grumbles, then yes, he knocks off the fastest lap. Lewis does that, knocks off the fastest lap and or wins the race. And yes, even in NASCAR, you know, when Kyle is angry with the car is when it is probably quickest slash at its best. It's hilarious to see that happen. Um, I would be interesting. I'd be interested. Somebody who is much smarter than me should analyze the psychology of that because I think there's a through line that runs in there somewhere, but I am not intelligent enough to be able to discern that. So I will not make those comparisons. But yeah, so no, Max complained about his tires on lap 12, but ended up running basically a complete stint anyway. Um, and it was wild, talk about Yas Marina not being exciting. Basically, starting on lap 7, like, 4th back to, like, 14. It was just a DRS train, like, the whole way through. And, nobody can make any kinda overtakes under DRS, even despite the fact that, car performance should be different enough. It's just we all made fun of, the trolley train back in the early 2000s. It's like, well, Yas Marina and a couple of other circuits on the calendar give us that, but just you have DRS, not just a slow driver in a fast car.
Honestly, I don't even DRS even like as a concept is just I don't know. I don't really like it to be honest, but my opinions aside or my personal feelings about DRS aside, it is what it is. But I love the circuit being named Yas Marina though. I think that's so funny.
Yeah, it is. It's very funny. Um,
I mean
yeah,
the place that it's on is called Yas Island.
hmm
Just
yeah, yeah. It's just to me, and I guess it works because like the whole idea of this track and as the season finale, and the light up hotel, it's all very extra. So it feels very fitting. But yeah, I don't love DRS personally. I know they did it back when we had a couple real snoozers of seasons. The idea was meant to spice up the racing, but it's just kind of I don't see. I don't want to say like artificial overtakes because I feel like that's maybe a bit unfair. But the fact that you're within 1 second in the DRS detection zone, and it opens up the rear wing, and you go fast. Now, interestingly enough, as the combination as the sensors get better, but also, I mean, the Red Bulls aside, um, the field has definitely closed up a bit. So, those hundredths, hell, those thousandths, I think are a bit more crucial now because we've seen a number of times where just at the corner right before or the section just after the DRS detection zone, they may have been within range, but right in that crucial part, they weren't and didn't get it, which I thought was interesting. But yeah, no, I agree. DRS I think kind of sucks. Honestly, the push to pass system that IndyCar uses, I think, is so much better. But yeah, I had, like I said, big DRS train, just Yas Marina things. Welcome, enjoy your stay. But yeah, Lewis and Pierre would come together on lap 15, coming off. It was the braking zone in coming off the straight, and that would result in mild damage for the pair of them. Pierre he lost the stacks of time, and it's not unreasonable to assume that the rear diffuser got a bit damaged and all of that. And you could very obviously see where Lewis had broken his front wing. Now Mercedes didn't elect to fix it. I guess figuring that was too much time wasted, but yeah, Pierre had a lockup in the braking zone, and Lewis basically couldn't adjust quickly enough, and it was just it was a very clumsy incident. Now, nobody really at fault. This kind of stuff happens, but it's just like, ugh. And then, Pierre was raging on the radio about it. It's like, dude, you locked up. That's
I feel
kind
like
of
he
what's going to
does
happen.
that. It might be like him being like French, like in how French people are always rioting and like angry about certain things, which I'm like, I totally get it. Maybe like I feel like he's done that a lot this season.
hmm I would agree. I think so too. Why again, I'm not going to psychoanalyze the guy, so why? I mean, whatever. But yes, he is very chatty, and he complains a fair bit on the radio about everything. Because actually, he got upset that they basically undercut it. They undercut him by stopping Ocon first. He was very grumpy about that. And now, granted, those two have a bit of history, and that could well have been part of it. But yes, he was very grumpy, and his race engineer basically just told him to shut up and drive a car.
I live for that, honestly. Like maybe because sometimes I'm not gonna like act like okay, drivers don't have the right to complain about whatever's going on with their car. But sometimes I feel like they just complain to complain. Like and this is like a thing across like all series sometimes. Like there'll just be times where it's like I don't think there's really anything wrong with their car. It's just they're not doing as well as they want to do and they're like they need to find some way, I guess, to excuse it or be like basically just like make an excuse in their mind or whatever. I don't know how else to describe this, but it's like I feel like that is something that's been happening across multiple different racing series, and it does. And it's like sometimes I just feel like, yeah, maybe their engineers just need to tell them there's nothing wrong. You just need to drive the car.
hmm Yeah, well, I mean, you're absolutely right. Now I wish more series were more like kind of F1 in the way that, they'll, like I said, the race engineers will basically say, be quiet, everything is fine, drive the car. And I think that's great. You don't get it because, NASCAR, pretty much the most you'll get is, spotter or crew chief will just basically go 10-4 and just not respond. Although interestingly enough, when Denny thought he had a loose wheel, his crew chief did say, it's fine, be quiet and drive the car. And then, of course, he pit and, cost himself a bunch of track position after they went and looked at the car and verified that it was perfectly fine. But that is the closest. Actually, that's not true. James Small and Truex, the way they talk to each other on the radio is like, monk ass. It's kind of ridiculous listening to those two go back and forth. Um,
The same
I
thing happened like with Max. I think like even last season, there were so many moments where I guess he was complaining about something on the car, and his engineer was just basically like, Max, there's nothing wrong.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Max's engineer, Jean-Pierre Lambresi, dude is hilarious. I live for their radio communications, because Max was getting into a bit of a tizzy. It might have been at Monaco. I think it was at Monaco.
What
And
could there
same.
possibly be to argue about with Monaco, especially with F1? F1 can barely put on a good race there. There's nothing that happens in the whole entire race. Like I was really, the other day watching a Formula E race at Monaco, and there was like three times as much action, in a Formula E race at Monaco than there is Formula One race. What could you possibly complain about with Monaco other than the fact that you can't pass anybody, which has less to do with the engineering of your car and the fact that the cars are just so fucking big that they take up all the space on the street and you can't overtake.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't remember what the context was anymore, but I seem to think that Max was in a very foul mood during Monaco, and GP had basically just had enough and was like, "Okay, you need to shut up and drive the car." And it was fantastic. I loved it. GP, certainly personality wise, is probably my favorite race engineer of the group at the moment. But yeah, no, it is. I love the communications. I think it's great. And especially, at an all French team like Alpine, where it's like they're just getting mad at each other and it just escalates and it's so great. But but yeah, no, Pierre would, yeah, so he would get damaged, he would get grumpy about it. Then Lando actually had kind of a slow stop due just because of a sticky wheel tire assembly. It was the rear left. And we talk about Mercedes having crummy stops all the time. Yeah, well, this was one of them because it was like a 5 and change second stop, which is very slow. Even though McLaren actually was the fastest pit team this season, they ran like a 1.8 second stop somewhere. I don't should have probably gone to go look at where that was, um, and I didn't. But that is wild to see stops that fast, and then to have a 5.1. But and it cost big time because George Russell pit at the same time, and it allowed him to jump because Lando on track had been a couple places up on George, but he lost all of that. Um, but funny thing is actually throughout all of the sequence of stops, because Yuki was effectively running a one-stop strategy, and he led the Grand Prix for a good bit during that first pit cycle. Um, the AlphaTauri were quick. Danny Ricciardo wouldn't finish quite as high, but he had a tear off from a helmet get stuck in one of his brake ducts, and they had to pit to get it out. And so that kind of jacked up his race. But certainly, if Yuki was anything to go by, they could have been on for double points. But so it goes. But speaking of which, I would like to talk about it because Danny pitted for it was like lap 8 or lap 9. I broadcast didn't really talk about it, and reading even the lap by lap report wasn't super specific. How on earth do you need to do a visor tear off that soon in a Grand Prix? That's just curious. And then
I don't
also
know.
the
Random, I mean, it is a desert. Random
yeah.
dust collected on it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's fair enough, but also and Martin Brundle, he talked about it, and it is, I think, the one thing that Martin was actually correct about, because Lord knows that man has lots of
Rare
terrible,
Martin Brundle W?
yeah, has lots of bad
Question
opinions.
mark.
Yes, I think so anyway, but he talked about certainly back in the old days how the visor tear-offs, basically you kept them in the car until the end of the race, as opposed to, well, discarding them outside, which is what they do now. And honestly, that's probably not a bad idea to go back to that. I don't know why they stopped in the first place, but yeah, the discarding of tear-offs, it's amazing that we don't have issues with them getting sucked into brake ducts more often, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it
I feel
seems like
like that's just by chance, like purely chance that that has not happened or has been as big of an issue, and it just now came up.
yeah, exactly. It's wild, but yeah, honestly, keeping them in the car is, until the end of the Grand Prix is probably the way to do it, to be honest. So no, I think he was, like I said, I think that is indeed a rare Martin Brundle dub because everything else he says is stupid. Um, but despite Yuki finishing P8, um, it wasn't enough, and they had actually been closing. They still couldn't pip Williams for P7 in the constructors. I didn't look at the final tally, but they were pretty close. And again, I think double points would have actually pushed them over the edge. But Williams would cling on to that spot after having a just forgettable weekend. We had talked about Alex dragging that Williams to, regularly points paying finishes. And even the fact that Logan had been improving, they finished P14 and P17, just like I said, a miserable weekend for them, just all around, unfortunately. I know that it got a little bit dicey at the start because Logan and actually might have been Logan and Gasly that actually had a bit of bumping at the start, and so much so that there was the stewards were investigating that. But yeah, but those cars, they were just, like I said, just dog slow this weekend, which is unfortunate. But
I mean, I feel like Williams has mostly been kind of slow. I mean, fast for them is probably like mid pack, honestly.
you're
High
exactly
mid
right.
pack.
Nope, you are completely correct. Yeah, their best finishes are usually, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, kind of that general area. That's a good day for them. We're well past, the dark days of, 2018, 2019, where that car was just miserably slow. So slow, basically they were going to finish, dead last, 19th, 20th every weekend. We are much quicker than that, but Williams certainly has a very long way to go to even have hopes of getting, back towards the front of the field. But funny enough, like McLaren, the development of this car has been genuinely promising. And if they can keep this kind of momentum, P7 in the constructors, I can't remember the last time, it was probably 2015 was probably the last time that they managed that. Because to be fair, the Williams at the start of the turbo hybrid era was quick, but when they did the wide, basically what they call, the wide track regs, and I guess that was 17, it just completely killed the pace of that car. But back to 2023, speaking of the fight, kind of, I guess, the best of the rest is now kind of P2 on back, but Ferrari versus Mercedes. So Leclerc got a bit tactical at the end because Checo got a 5-second penalty for just running into Lando. And that was just the dumbest thing I've ever seen, honestly. Lando tried to leave the door open because I think he knew that Checo was going to have a go and apexed late, and Checo still ran into him. It's just like, dude, it's like you fighting for your life in that team. You cannot be doing stuff like this.
I mean, he's fighting eviction, is what he's fighting.
Yes. And it's like, well, stuff like this, like I said, it doesn't help. And like I said, it earned him a 5-second penalty because a lap or two later, he went and had to go at the same chicane and did the move successfully. But Mercedes and Ferrari were waging a battle for P2 in the Constructors' Championship. And it's so funny listening to the radio messages of what do I need to do to get, Checo 5 seconds clear of Russell. And then you have Russell on the radio of where are we in, the championship. And he's asking about Lewis, and it's the same thing. George's race engineer basically just said, don't worry about it and drive the car. Funny enough, Leclerc was running P2. I know he backed up to get Checo in DRS range. Checo overtook him and had started making a little bit of time, but it wasn't enough. The difference was 3.1 seconds, I do believe. No, it's 3.8, sorry. 3.8 seconds by the end of the race. And, Sergio with a 5-second penalty, dropped him off of the podium and lost him some points. And Mercedes took it by 3 or 4 points. They ended up getting P2 in the championship. Russell finished third. Lewis finished ninth. And Sainz was just slow all day. They tried to basically run it super long, hoping for a safety car. And so they ended up pitting on like the second to last lap to change tires. They basically ran on hards and just hemorrhaged time the whole time, if I remember correctly. And it's funny, right at the end, they didn't show it on the broadcast, which was super disappointing. But, Lewis actually made a run at Yuki coming out of turn 15. So, like, literally, like the second to last corner before the start finish straight. and just had a big slide and got all crossed up over it and didn't quite do it. But those last 5 laps, given how tactically basically everybody in the top 10 was playing for, well, everybody except for the Red Bulls, of course, for constructors' points. Just like I said, it was a real tactical game, and it was actually kind of fun. That it still wouldn't say it turned this into a good race per se, but it was an interesting sort of race within a race, if you will, to kind of finish it off.
I'm sitting here laughing because I'm seeing this last thing saying because there was apparently teams were being investigated. I might have been after the race. I just remember seeing like the posts about it because apparently there were pit crew members that were not wearing the correct safety gear. I can't
Oh,
even
uh-huh.
say without laughing. It to me that is just so funny because like how like I don't how does that happen? Like you can't even freaking go into a like class like a science lab unless you have like safety goggles. And these people are at a freaking racetrack working on cars and everything else. Like how does this happen?
Yeah, it was just shortly after the second set of stops. There actually were the messages, the race control messages popping up on the dash on the broadcast, sorry. And and it said it was initially Lewis and Gasly, funny enough. And it said pit lane infractions, and it's like, okay, were they speeding by chance? And then there was some further clarification from race control about, well, no, it was actually due to pit crew members. And it's like, what? And even everybody on the broadcast was confused as hell about it. They were like, how? And then was it might have actually been Verstappen. Was same thing. It said, pit lane infringement. So, from what I understand, those were the 3 teams. It sounds like it might have been potentially been more because from what I understand, post-race, all of the teams were basically hauled to the steward's office to talk about it and to basically go over, what you should be wearing and how you should be wearing it if you're in the pits.
It makes me laugh because I'm literally picturing in my mind that it's either some team members that are changing tires without gloves, or they are wearing their helmets backwards or not wearing a helmet at all. I mean, I don't know what it was, but I find it so funny. That is so hilarious to me.
Yeah, it was initially speculated that it might have been surrounding gloves and goggles. It was never formally confirmed what exactly the goof up was, but yeah, everybody got in trouble and it was thought that the teams might get fined for it. I certainly haven't seen any posts published from Formula One or the FIA if that was the case, but yeah, it's just so dumb. I mean, like, it's 2023, and, we have seen, it doesn't take much for you to potentially, if you're not wearing the proper safety equipment, to basically hurt yourself on the cars. So why this is an issue, it's like, I don't know. It's like I half expect it's like, what? Next am I gonna see, Alpine, they're gonna be, smoking a cigarettes around the car or something? It's like that's half what I expect to see going forward if it's like this is what you guys are doing.
It won't even be cigarettes, it'll be vape.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, is McLaren still sponsored by that vape shop?
McLaren has so many f***ing sponsors now. I can't even keep track. Like they they came a long way because I don't know if it's like 2018, 2019, their card was like blank. Like there was nothing on their card, no sponsors at all. And they went from that to like having like so many different sponsors. I'm like, I don't know. Like the main people I know that sponsor them is obviously like Google and like Arrow, but I don't know.
Yeah, I have to go back and look because I know at least for a time, I know they were sponsored by some, vape corporation as, a way to basically, it's not tobacco any money. It was, vaping money for a bit. Now it's just crypto. But anyway, um,
Which
but yeah,
that's
no.
going well. That is going absolutely fantastic. Having
Oh yeah,
crypto sponsors.
Yeah, the fact that half of them have gone belly up, it's great. Sports betting is going to be the next one. I can feel it.
Probably, because there's already even like in NASCAR, there's the DraftKings scheme. I think Bubba Wallace ran that at like Pocono or something.
hmm Yeah, Bubba's run DraftKings, and actually, funny enough, actually, the funny thing you want to talk about Yahtzee is actually Alfa Romeo, Stucky. They're both crypto and sports betting. They are literally the same thing. So I don't know if that's gonna survive as Alpha reverts back to being Sauber for next year before Audi takes over. But
But
I
you know
guess
what? We
that
really need another sponsor though. We need OnlyFans. We need more. We need OnlyFans to sponsor more race teams because that would just be so hilarious.
yeah, it absolutely would. I mean, they have, metric truckloads of money. Actually, funny enough, her name is Rebecca Busey. She does lots of off-road stuff, and I follow her across socials. And she does, like I said, she does genuinely neat stuff. And since she's sponsored by the team, we're sponsored by the company rather. Follow her on there. And then there was an American Moto 1000 rider. I can't remember what his name is, but he's also sponsored by them, and it's super funny to see that. But that being said, it's also kind of cool. I think I would rather that than like crypto and sports betting. I don't know. We can think piece that later,
At
but
least you would know that OnlyFans would is stable. Like OnlyFans as a sponsor would be far more stable and less volatile than a fucking crypto sponsor.
yeah, you are absolutely right.
Like
And
I think recently one of them that was sponsoring I don't even know if they were sponsoring an F1 team. I could be remembering this all wrong, but I know one of them is like in like huge trouble now because they owe a lot of money
mhm,
that they can't pay essentially because the whole company like blew up. I think it
mhm.
was like FTX or something.
Yeah, no, you are absolutely right. FTX, FTX had their hands in a number of things. They had their names on sports arenas. They were sponsoring like NBA teams. A number of high profile celebrities did that Super Bowl advertisement a couple years ago. And yeah, Mercedes was actually sponsored by FTX. Um, the demo car that they trotted out for Las Vegas, which was one of the old race cars, actually still had the FTX sponsor stickers on it. Is
You know
super
what? Maybe we need
dumb.
to make that into an episode where we just go over a bunch of like shady sponsors. Unless
Hmm,
somebody's already done that before.
somebody probably has, but that being said, there are so many that I could. Well, honestly, you thought the Las Vegas script was long. That one could be very long if we decide to sit through that chronologically, going through bad sponsors. But that's a good idea for off-season content.
Like I
Stay
know
tuned.
like Rocket is one of them. Like
hmm
Rocket is like, oh my God.
Yeah,
I think
Rocket.
they fell into obscurity, honestly, after
hmm
last year.
Yep, yep. Rocket. They were because
And
they
they were
were.
sponsoring so many they were sponsors in so many racing series too, like from IndyCar. They were in F1 at one point eventually. I think they were sponsoring Williams. They
Yep.
were in Formula E. It's like
hmm
they were everywhere. And I'm like, y'all were definitely cashing checks that you could not make up for.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there are lots of rough ones. Then I mean, obviously, we know why, but Urakali on the Haas's, I mean, that was tied to Mazepin. But so we, have that one. Then, certainly if you want to go further back, it's like Onyx, which was this whole, which they were sponsored. Well, actually, it was their team owner, Jean-Pierre Van Rossum. He died in 2020. But, the Moneytron supercomputer thing, which is basically, same thing. It's basically crypto nonsense before crypto nonsense was really a thing. Infinite money, guaranteed returns, you know, you will make, you will be richer than God, basically. And it was nonsense. And then he got busted by Interpol in the early 90s, if I remember correctly. But yeah, honestly, it sounds like we might need to do a sort of through the years episode of crummy sponsors at some point. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But But yes. So it leads actually nicely into season recap. Um, so I guess we usually start out with best race and worst race. So for me, best race once the race actually functioned, worked, was actually Las Vegas. The racing at Las Vegas was very good. Just full stop. You had basically racing at the front, in the middle, in the back. I mean, don't get me wrong, the issues with the track and the lead up, it's all a very good meme and deservedly so. But the actual on track product was really, really good. Um, and as for my worst race, well, Monaco. There's always Monaco, truth be told. But that being said, I don't really love Bahrain either, but I still think Monaco is worse because it's a parking lot, and even qualifying is not fun anymore.
Yeah, so for me, I would definitely say Vegas. I thought Vegas was pleasantly surprising as a race. I mean, I was expecting it to be completely awful, but it wasn't. And I'm like, okay. Despite all the bullshit that was leading up to the race, it turned out fine at least. For worst race, for me, it's almost like I'm gonna say like a three-way tie between Miami,
Yeah.
Monaco, of course, and Qatar. Like Qatar, I guess I would say like, you know, there's plenty of action, I guess I could say. I'm just saying like honestly it was just not that good of a race just because just how much like stuff the drivers went through like physically and I'm like, okay, maybe this is like not that great. Um Miami Miami is just not good at all.
No,
Like,
Miami's pretty
honestly, I
trash.
would be perfectly fine if they just dropped Miami off the schedule and just kept there being 2 Grand Prix in the US just being COTA and Las Vegas. It is Las Vegas is again as much bullshit as there is that surrounds that race. The racing is far better. Like the racing product is far better than what Miami could ever fucking produce. So I would be perfectly fine if Miami just dropped off the face of the earth. It's honestly just I hate it. And Monaco is Monaco. It's like that every year. So honestly, I can't even say that I am shocked because that's how it is all the time. Like it's everybody like I've said this before. It'll be my whole timeline is lighting up. Literally everybody and their mama is talking about qualifying and how great it is and how, exciting it is. Then comes the race, crickets. Nobody ever says anything about the race. It is just complete silence. So I'm like, it's Monaco is Monaco. Really all the way. That's the only thing I can use to describe it.
Yeah, I
But
completely
honestly, I
agree.
guess if I had to rank it, maybe I would say Miami first, Monaco second, then Qatar third.
Yeah, I completely agree with that actually. Out of the battle of the bad, I would say Qatar is the
Battle of
least.
Mid.
Yes. Yeah, I think Qatar is the least bad. But that's the thing. I don't really even think Monaco is completely really all even quality I don't really think is that great anymore. This year it was a little spicier because it rained all weekend. So the
But
sessions were a
without
little.
the rain, it probably would have been lackluster.
Yeah, I was just about to say it was a little bit better this year because, it rained, but it's like years previous, basically really since I guess kind of the last sort of car regs, I don't really think Monaco qualifying has even been particularly fun anymore. They're
And again,
just they're
I think
just too
it's
big.
it's because the F1 cars are just too big for the
Hmm.
circuit anymore. And it's like there's no passing, there's no again, no overtakes, nothing. Like nothing goes on. It's basically just the only thing great about Monaco is the aesthetics because it looks aesthetically pleasing to have F1 cars going up and down the streets and whatnot. But other than that, as a race, it's complete shit. And everybody knows it. People know it. I feel like, and to be honest, I only put up with Monaco and even fucking watch it just to complete my little package of motorsports Christmas that day. I don't even really watch Monaco for like actually because I'm excited for the fucking race. I watch it just because, again, to put the bow on saying I watch Monaco, the Indy 500, and the Coke 600 all in the same day. Even though the only race I really get excited for now is the Indy 500. Everything else, I'm like, don't really care. Could care less, but that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yes, in truth be told, at the rate we're going, that the modern F1 cars are going to need to do a 3-point turn through Mirabeau at the rate that we're going with how big that they get. But no, like I said, I watch Monaco because yes, motorsport's Christmas, but I think certainly the Indy 500 I think is the best product of the day because good sweet Jesus, NASCAR really needs to figure out the package for the cup cars. It's just so bad. Intermediates are great, but super speedways are terrible. Short tracks usually aren't great, and road courses really aren't all that good either. These cars are just terrible. I'll try and keep that rant to a minimum because Arthur and I screamed about it a lot through the last about 7 races of the season over on the main pod. So
You know
if you
what?
really,
Going back to Monaco, I feel like we just might be at least one or two generations of F1 cars away from having a 2017 Macau incident happen at Monaco. Because again, the cars are so fucking big. They're huge. They're massive. And it's like you have one person that messes up one turn at Monaco. And again, it's Macau 2017 all over again with F1 cars, which would probably be worse because I'm sure that's even more expensive than the millions of dollars of sports cars that happened there.
no, I think you're right. We're gonna need to do a 3-point turn at Mirabeau, and it means if somebody goofs it up, then yeah, you're gonna have just a pile up, and it'll be really funny. But it'll be a real embarrassment for the sport. But speaking of embarrassments of the sport, well, Mazepin is gone, so he doesn't count anymore. But driver grades. Yay, nay, any positive surprises, any negative surprises?
I
What
was
say
pleasantly
you?
surprised, honestly, with how Oscar Piastri did this season. You know, I wasn't actually expecting him to do like too bad, just because I mean I think he won the F2 championship, and I guess that should mean that you're a good driver, even though there have been other drivers who have won the F2 championship and have completely flopped when they got an F1.
Nick DeVries.
Don't know why that happened, but Oscar Piastri seems to be cut out for it. So good for him. Round of applause. I will give his season performance a solid B.
Hmm. I think that's fair. Certainly surprises. Well, so I guess surprise for me is the fact that they even signed him in the first place, and I feel so bad, but it's DeVries. Don't get me wrong, he is a talented driver. He did win F2. Very fast in Formula E because actually he's back with Mahindra, isn't he?
He is.
Yep. So, he's a great driver, but if the stories are to be believed, Helmut Marko basically wanted him on the premise of one race that he subbed in at a track where Williams is traditionally fast, and that is Monza. So, like, I don't really know what you expected. Like, there's a reason why Mercedes, even though he was within their sort of driver radar, their sort of satellite pool of talent, why they never gave him the call. And again, like I said, none of this is to trash Nick DeVries. Let me be perfectly clear. He's like I said, he is still an accomplished driver, and by all accounts, he seems like he's actually a really nice guy. Um, but yeah, that was dumb. That was so dumb. So I guess the L is less Nick and more Helmut Marko in
I
this
mean,
instance.
somebody even brought up like earlier today, they made a tweet about I think they were saying why didn't like Mercedes or might have been AlphaTauri, why didn't they instead of going with DeFries give Stoffel Van Dorn a chance? Which I'm like, that would probably make more sense.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I had never considered Stoffel a waffle, but with a little bit more careful consideration, honestly, that wouldn't have been a bad shout. Um, now interestingly, I know for at least again, this is mostly reporting and kind of reporting on rumor mill. So take these with a few lunar-sized grains of salt. But from what I understand, Nick effectively bailed on the Mercedes. Like I said again, their sort of driver talent pool because he was basically hoping that if he could, thrash Yuki, then he could, put Checo on the hot seat. Which is interesting. Um, Certainly, I like his confidence if that is indeed the case. But
I
it
mean, is
sounds.
it confidence or is it delusion?
Yeah, well, I guess potentially some combination thereof. But point being is that, well, it was a bold strategy, Cotton, and it did not pay off at all. Because he got, sacked after 10 races. And then from what it sounds like basically from, well, what ended up being the aborted Imola weekend onward, it sounded like Helmut Marko was pretty sick of him. So, that's a shame. But as for positive surprises, yeah, definitely Oscar and Liam Lawson. Liam came in cold after Ricardo broke his hand, and he was just fast. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Liam, spent the last little while in Super Formula, which is ultra, ultra competitive. And so if you can hack it in Super Formula, you can probably hack it everywhere. But it was still wild to see him be as quick as he was, as fast as he was. And I know Daniel Ricciardo is a fan favorite, and I'm sorry, but honestly, I think Liam should have gotten that seat and not
Yeah, you
Daniel.
know what? Let's just rip the Band-Aid off because honestly, I feel the same way. I feel like 110% AlphaTauri, if they were not taking the fucking piss, they should have signed Lawson instead of Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, I get it. Everybody likes him. He's a fan favorite. He does a lot like for like marketing F1 because he is a very personable figure. However, when it comes to his driving abilities, it's like again, if if I'm serious about being a serious team and being competitive, I would have went with Lawson. I mean, I think it's kind of a shame that he's a reserve driver again, but I mean, I don't know. And then having Lawson probably would have also helped them probably get some better results out of Yuki. I mean, he's doing decent so far, I would say, but that would probably push him to do a lot more because when you have somebody like Liam Lawson on the other side, it's like, yeah, you're gonna have to, that's upping the antes a lot.
Yeah, exactly, and you are exactly correct. Uh, when, it was Nick, I mean, Yuki had Nick's number, like, the whole time. Um, and then even with Daniel Ricciardo, he's been, the pace deficit is much smaller, but Yuki, on average, is still the faster driver over the course of, 5 races, which is a granted, I accept that that is not a huge data pool, but, whatever, you make do. But when Liam was in the car, Liam was categorically quicker than Yuki. I think every race except for one. I can't remember which one that was, but and just again, on average, Liam was just quicker. And it really frankly, it kind of exposed Yuki. I'm personally not going to put Yuki on fraud watch quite yet, but Yuki needs to get it together. I mean, this is his third season, fourth season in F1. He's been here for a little bit, but because he regularly has, well, frankly, not great teammates, um, it's allowed him, I think, to coast a little bit. Um, and yes, I think a faster driver it would force him to get better because it would put him on the hot seat.
I mean, to be honest, I would do the same thing. If my teammate's mid and I can just essentially waffle around race after race and kind of, you know, get by with the skin between my teeth and, not really have to do much, fuck it, I would do it too.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm not mad, minimal effort for maximum gains. I'm not mad about that at all, but it's part of why I think AlphaTauri has really been stagnant these last couple years. But speaking of, that rolls in actually really, really nicely to team grades, positive, negatives. Um, I'm going to give Mercedes a failing grade for flubbing the second season in a row. It's like, I understand they've got their inner targets, but, Lewis clearly knew what was up before they did because, even going so far to have said that he suggested where to move the car in the aero concept, and they just didn't listen. And then this car was a dog. And now they had to pay for it. So Mercedes just straight up F. I know they finished P2 in the championship, but F. Summer school for you.
Not summer school. I don't even know who I would. Honestly, I was gonna be a little bit less harsh with Mercedes and just give them a D. A D is passing, and some in some places it's passing, but honestly, their season was not that great. Mercedes being Mercedes is what I'm gonna chalk it up to.
Yeah, basically, like I said, they got P2, and certainly on paper that is good. But like I said, I don't think it was on pace. I think it was just through circumstance. Ergo, somebody in a faster car did something stupid. And in this instance, it was that Ferrari usually Ferrari'd. And that was how Mercedes was able to profit, is just because, well, they may be bad, but they aren't Ferrari bad. And as for certainly positive surprises, it's probably McLaren, because the start of the season was horrid. I think both Lando and Oscar, I think, ended up retiring at Bahrain, if I remember correctly. Or was that Bahrain or was that Jeddah? I can't remember which. But, they ended up retiring early in the season. And the car was just horrible. But like I said, the upgrades that they brought for Silverstone was just great, and the car has been fast ever since.
I mean, at
You know,
least their upgrades seem to actually do something. When Mercedes, they will talk about every other weekend. It seemed like, oh, we're gonna have upgrades to the car. We're gonna have some upgrades, and it's like, did the upgrades do anything?
no.
Possibly not, because it seemed like they talked about those upgrades so much, and nothing seemed to happen.
Yeah, upgrades for Silverstone, upgrades for Monza, and upgrades. There are a couple more because I think they ended up introducing like 4 different upgrade packages for that car. And yeah, it just didn't do anything. That was consistently basically between third and, well, actually, really like fourth and like eighth place car, depending on the circuit and the weekend. And that was pretty much where it was to start the season. Granted, yes, some teams actually made some forward progress, which does disrupt that data plot a little bit. But yeah, it was not great.
Another
But
team I will give a grade to is Aston Martin.
oh,
I will give them a C plus.
okay.
Why? The beginning of the season, there was some potential,
Mm-hmm.
and throughout most of the season there seemed to be potential as well. However, it seemed like they just, for whatever reason, it just slowly just started teetering off. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
what happened there. I think we mentioned this before. We talked about this before. Might have been like something that happened with Silverstone. They changed something at Silverstone, and then since then, again, teetered off. So I'm like, again, they were looking kind of racy. Um, Towards the beginning of the season, most of the season, up until like the end. So C plus for them.
Yeah, no, so yes, we did briefly mention this. I think after the the Mexico Bahrain sort of double header race episode that we did. But the TLDR of that was that yes, they made some tweaks to the floor, and it completely borked the aero balance of the car. But yeah, no, because to start the season, they were second quickest car, third quickest car in the grid. Sort of trading blows with Ferrari. And everybody was talking about, okay, well, when is Fernando Alonso going to get a race win? It felt like it was inevitable the first, 6 races of the season. And then, yeah, the car just got slow. outpaced in development, and then they just, like I said, then they just goofed up the upgrades, and it really killed the car. And then, certainly from a broader constructors championship, sort of broader championship implications, well, Lance Stroll is on that team, and that's never going to get you very far, like at all, actually.
No, it's
Yeah,
not.
and this is the frustrating part is where Lance Stroll, because when had Bria on after Coda, and we talked about it a bit, where Lance tends to be quick in sort of changeable weather, and he's really good at like the tire management stuff. He would be killer in sports cars, and I really wish they would basically release him so he could do the Valkyrie hypercar program. That would be so cool. But because both he and his father are absolutely hell bent on Formula One, he just basically sits and frankly wastes a seat. You know, Fernando is, he's getting old, and Fernando Alonso, well, frankly, Fernando is a messy bitch, but he's not the problem in this instance, unusually.
That's what I think. I still think Lance Stroll, that's what you already said it. I'm like, I truthfully feel like he should just go join Aston Martin on the sports car side and join their Valkyrie lineup for their assault in the World Endurance Championship eventually when they join it. But oh well.
Yeah, yeah, basically. But which is, like I said, it's a bummer, but whatever. But I guess speaking of driver market stuff, we have finally have the final seat. Was it either yesterday or this morning? It was confirmed Logan is staying with Williams for 2024. We talked about it. We felt like it would be super stupid for them to drop Logan after a single season. It's not been a great year, but
I
you
mean, it
know,
wasn't, but at the same time, it's like, again, it just feels kind of weird for them, especially considering the fact that he is, again, their development driver. They
mhm.
invested a lot of time and money into him, and it would just be kind of weird for them to just drop him all of a sudden because to essentially drop a rookie because they did rookie things. Like,
Mhm.
his season, he's a rookie. It went bad probably because of that. I mean, not everybody is going to jump into racing series and have just a breakout year in their rookie season. There have been plenty of people, plenty of drivers who have a rookie season and it's mid, it's forgettable, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it a little bit at the time when, some of the silly season stuff was getting underway and the rumor mill was intensifying that Logan might get dropped. But, I maintain that I feel like, and don't get me wrong, and, certainly if you pay attention to my socials, I adore Lewis, but I feel like he really broke sort of the concept, the standards for what a rookie really should be and what should be expected of a rookie. I mean, he went out and won a title in his first year. And now it feels like basically since then, it feels like it is expected that basically every rookie is going to go and do the same thing. It's like the fact that, Oscar has been as quick as he is, but, for some folks, it still hasn't been enough. And it's like, how? It's like, dude is qualifying, high. And basically, the only time he didn't do all that well was because either it was, because Formula 2 and Formula 1 schedule is not the same, so there were a few tracks he just hadn't been to, or, it was just where the McLaren was slow. It's like, but Oscar had a very successful season by basically every other metric. But yeah, like I said, it feels like Lewis really broke that scale for what
I mean,
rookies should be.
it could be that. Like, I definitely feel like because Lewis came in and was already winning off the bat as a rookie, and that kind of sets the bar really high. It also was this was something that somebody else mentioned on Twitter, how essentially like the the quality of F1 rookies has kind of gone down. And some of that is due to the fact that there's not a whole lot of preparation that rookies are put through before like they before the season starts. Essentially, there's not a whole lot of testing and making sure things are okay with them. Like IndyCar drivers are put through more testing. Like IndyCar rookies are put through a lot more testing and preparation than F1 rookies are. I feel like you could make that argument, which is like that's probably why that some rookies are just not that great because it's like, well, what the do you expect them to do? You didn't prep them in any way, shape, or form, or you didn't take enough time to prep them, and then you put them season starts and they start off on the wrong foot, or they, kind of flop throughout the season. It's like, well, what do you expect to happen? Like,
Yeah, exactly. No, the fact that we don't exist in, the era of, loads and loads and loads of testing anymore. Testing is actually pretty restricted. You get the few days at Silverstone, a bit at Bahrain, and then there's some end of season testing that's actually taking place as we record this at Yas Marina right now. But that's basically it. Um, and some F1 prospects that get the ability to do like FP1 usually the last few races of the season. They'll do a bit of that, but like I said, that is basically it. um you know this is not the days where Alain Prost was grumbling about the fact that he was running you know tens of thousands of kilometers of testing while Ayrton Senna was on a beach in Brazil somewhere. Those days are long gone. Or the days when Michael Schumacher in the early 2000s did like 40,000, 50,000 kilometers of testing during the winter in what was that 2002, I do believe, was that year that they did a stupid amount of testing. Um, yeah, those days are long gone. F1 is super restrictive, and yes, that doesn't help because it means the rookies don't get a ton of seat time. But speaking of which, there are no rookies this year. Basically, everybody stays put, which is
yeah,
kind of wild.
2024 is the season where things are gonna have the huge shakeup, unless most of these people end up getting extensions on their contracts. Because it seems to me, from what I've looked at on the little graphic thing, is that most people's contracts are through 2024 or 2025, and then some people's are beyond that. But a vast majority of the grid, their contract is supposed to end in 2024.
Hmm.
So that could be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do. I find that, like I said, just absolutely fascinating. I don't remember the last time that the grid, like I said, basically just stayed put. Because you get some shuffling where the drivers may not change too much, but they'll go to other teams. But just nobody moved this year, and like I said, that's kind of wild. So it'll like you said, it'll probably be as the start of the shakeup was going to happen next year, and then throughout the next couple years after that, they're going to see big movements either in or out. Um, but yeah, no, that like I said, that's super interesting. But and speaking of these kind of shakeups and moves, Alfa Romeo Sauber is gone. It's just back to being Sauber for the year. Um, certainly the liveries of the Alphas were always very, very pretty, so that'll be kind of a bummer to see those gone. But yeah, Peter Sauber's name is officially back on the car, so we'll see. I know there's lots of talk about Audi maybe getting cold feet on the F1 project, and it's like, what's going to happen to Sauber if that ends up being the case? Because it feels like they've kind of bankrolled their future on this Audi deal.
Who knows? Another thing that's happening apparently is there's a rebrand with AlphaTauri.
Oh
They're
yeah.
no longer being AlphaTauri. They're no longer AlphaTauri next season, and they're now going to be the Racing Bulls, I think.
Oh, okay. Is that confirmed? I know I had seen a leak of it about a month ago. Well, I say leak again, at large air quotes there, but yeah, I had seen that and didn't know if that had been confirmed. Which, if that's the case, that's such a stupid name.
It
Like,
it
honestly,
feels
that's
very much
horrible.
like video game. Like it doesn't really seem real.
No, it doesn't. It feels like
They should just bring back Toro Rosso. That was so much better.
yeah, Toro Rosso was great. Especially, basically Red Bull and Italian and perfect given that they're in the old Minardi facility in Faenza. No, it was great. And then, the whole AlphaTauri for apparently a clothing brand that I'm not sure ever really existed.
I think it exists.
Does it actually though? It's
Yeah,
kind
it
of one of
does.
I mean, it's kind of one of those bare shits in the woods things, you know. If nobody's there to see it, did it actually
I mean,
happen?
I saw they had their drivers like modeling AlphaTauri clothing at like the beginning of the season.
I not sure
I mean,
that
I don't
counts. It's
know.
the
I don't think
drivers.
it's like
Come
a
on.
pyramid scheme per se or like an MLM. Like it's
Well,
not
okay, I don't
real
think
at
it's
all. Like I think it's legit.
yeah, I don't think it's that bad, but that's the only capacity that I have ever seen AlphaTauri has been related to the F1 team. I've never seen AlphaTauri clothing, and I'm, you know,
I mean, I don't know. If you go and like look at like AlphaTauri, like I mean, there's a website that has their clothing and stuff on
do
it.
they only sell online? You know, granted, I don't do a ton of,
I
you
have
know,
no
like
idea.
I don't do a ton of like in-store shopping to be fair much these
I
days,
think
but
they do have an actual store.
I was like, do they have outlets? Do they, you know, sell, do they supply to, you know, clothing chains? Because like I said, I'm kind of into clothes and fashion. In fact, actually the jacket I have an Alpha Industries jacket on the back of this chair. Um, that I bought myself actually for Christmas last year. But yeah, I'm like, I don't really ever see it kind of feels like, you know, Rich Energy. You know, technically it was a thing that existed, but good luck getting your hands on one, on a can. Speaking of which, I should actually go see if there are like cases available on Amazon. I feel like that could be really funny to buy that. I know the meme is kind of dead, but that would
It's
be
probably not even good.
from everything I heard it wasn't, but again, for the giggles, I feel like it might be worth it if it's cheap enough anyway, because I'm not spending $100 on a case of Rich Energy. That's stupid. But anyhow, um, but yeah, no, AlphaTauri kind of felt the similar, you know, oh, it's this clothing brand that we want to promote and turn attention to. But again, other than, you know, Pierre and, you know, Yuki and what have you, it never really felt like they it felt like that was it. And it just like I said, it doesn't make sense to me, you know. But whatever, you know, racing bulls, fine. It's stupid, kind of like AlphaTauri was, but I guess it's par for the course. Like I said, they really should have just you were absolutely right when you said they just should have left it Toro Rossa because that was great. And you know, and the fact that they had it as kind of inverted colors of the Red Bull can, it like I said, it was really really neat, and it feels like a missed opportunity. I don't know, no, but it feels like a fictional racing team on like Grid. The Grid racing games is what it feels like. It feels like they would be the main competitors for Raven West. Which prime grid lore for anybody who plays those games. But anyway, that's what it is. It sounds like so. You know, if that's what ends up being the case, that is very bad. But well, just another crummy Formula One rebrand. But anyway, there has been quite a bit of mucking about this episode. Good lord. But that will wrap up the certainly the season one recap. You know, I will be working on some fun kind of long form stuff, kind of like Vegas in the F1 off season. You know, any silly season updates that are worth covering, we will cover. But truth be told, there's really not much left, not unless there's news on like Andretti Cadillac or whatever. But that whole saga is one continuous rolling car crash. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, that's certainly about all I got. You got any parting thoughts for us before we conclude?
No, I don't think so.
Well, in which case, it has been a pleasure recording. We will catch you in the next episode. Until next time, y'all.
Peace.